Well, so now that we're on the subject of how could Andy have helped Zach before he got to Arizona, is there for the people out there who are just trying to get into the industry, is there something that you wish you knew back then when you were first kind of getting into the zone?
I think I just wish I knew myself better and what my strengths and weaknesses are. And um, you go into a job like this and you're tweeting to like millions of people and you have to be like confident, but it's important to be self-aware and not so confident that you're not, making sure to learn from people who know more than you. So I think for me, figuring out what those things are and what things were important to me in my job to make sure that I was getting those things out of my job. Um, I love knowing answers to questions. I like making sure that everything is set up and right and like ready to go. But we were talking about it before, like flexibility in this job is essential. And sometimes you don't know things and you can't know when certain things are going to happen. We always say like at the Penguins, like hurry up and wait. Like we want to be in the right place and be ready for whatever might happen. And then we might be waiting there for a while and things might not come together exactly the way that we anticipated. But it's not like be here this time on the dot. Like here's exactly how something's going to run, like an event brief. Never.
Yeah.
So I think being, more comfortable with the ambiguity of all of that and not asking so many times, like, what do you need from me? Like, where should I be? What am I doing? And just kind of like flowing with things, being more go with the flow. So I think just knowing yourself and asking mentors or people who are working with you or for you or you're working for, like, okay, hey, like, how am I doing? Like, be honest with me. Like, what things am I doing that are not helping the organization or are very annoying for you to work with? And I think those are going to be different for everybody. But I think making sure that you're figuring out what those things are and then working on them to get better. Um,
Sure.
I think also it's just having a good attitude. Like a lot of people in sports feel super overwhelmed with their jobs because there's a lot going on. And if you're coming with a positive attitude, even if you don't know everything or, you're maybe feeling overwhelmed at school, if you're an intern or something and you're getting in there, like just being like, hey, like I'm here, like I'm ready to learn and or maybe like, hey, I'm feeling overwhelmed today, but I'm excited to like get started on something new and just trying to um, bring a good vibe and a good attitude is, I think, can't be overstated enough. It's
It's
a
true.
huge part of the battle.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. And it's just like it's a scary thing to say for me, I think personally, but it's like it's okay not to know everything. That's kind of the double-edged sword, the blessing and the curse of this industry is like you're always learning something new. And if you're not, then you're falling behind. So it's like being able to be okay with making mistakes, or if it's like, hey, I need you to do this, it's like, all right, well, I don't know how, but like I'll do the research, I'll figure it out. Like, don't worry
Yeah.
about it.
Yep. Yeah. I
But
mean, there's always things that you don't know. So
it's crazy.
we're trying to figure out, if I could give you a list right now of a million
Yes.
things we don't know that we're trying to figure out to do a better job in digital.
No, that's it. It's constantly just learning and learning. And every year it's like, as soon as you are satisfied with what you did, you fall behind the next day, the next week, the next year. Like it's so funny.
Or you like don't, you're like, oh, I'm satisfied with what I did. And then you go to like the Pirates website and you're like, oh man, that looks so much better than something that we did. Like, how do we how do we figure out how to do this better? And like it's never ending. Social is
Yeah.
always changing, digital is always changing. There's always someone doing it better in some aspect of the business. I mean, we've had so many calls and like we've connected each other with so many people over the years of like, hey, like, do you know anyone at the Mavs? Like they're doing something really cool on their ticketing landing page, or hey, do you know someone at the Panthers? I'd love to talk to them about a video they did. And like we just, yeah, I mean, we talked to the Dolphins about their paid social and like
Oh
their
yeah.
strategy. I mean, there's so many teams that are doing such a good job in like these small pocket areas that you're like, maybe they're not doing something we want to do in one place, but they're like killing it in another. And it's just like you're just trying to like inch up to get to like the best you can be, but there's
Yep.
always more room to grow.
No, for sure. And it's cool too, where it's like this industry, it's so like it's so huge and there's so many people in it now, but it's also like it's kind of small where it's like you can reach out to anyone, like anyone that I've reached out to, whether it was, I reached out to probably 10 or 12 people in baseball when I was making the transition of just like, hey, I don't know you, but would you be willing to, jump on a call and just let me pick your brain about, baseball and like making content for baseball? Every single person was like, yeah, for sure. Like, here's my number, let's talk. And it's
It's
like,
so true.
it's so amazing to be able to learn because it's like we're all, yeah, we're different teams and in some cases competing against each other, but like we're all fighting the same fight together in different ways and we're set up different ways and there's different people in different positions and it's like it's so cool to be able to rely on others where it's like I had a call, I think it was probably a few months ago, but guy who works for the Red Bull F1 team and he's stationed over in England. And it's like,
Hmm.
we just connected on LinkedIn and talked for like an hour. And it's like, I don't know anything about F1, but it was like everything that he said, it was so cool and so interesting to learn where it's like, it's so funny how big yet small the world is.
Totally. We were bought by Fenway Sports Group somewhat recently, and so like being able to meet up with the Red Sox people and the people in Liverpool and like their racing team, and there's so many now properties that we can talk to, and it's like, how are you guys doing this? And what was your strategy behind that? And where are you making your money from? And like, what does that look like? It's it's really interesting. I've learned a lot, just from talking to people at Liverpool and the Red Sox and teams that are not operating maybe the same way as we are, but are trying a lot of similar things on digital. So
It's cool.
yeah, it's definitely been interesting, and like same kind of thing. Like I connected with Kelsey at the Red Sox like years and years ago. They had a Twitter vending machine, and I was like, whoa, we want a Twitter vending machine. Like,
Yeah.
what is this? And I think Terry had connected me with her back in the day, and it's like now, like years later, I'm connecting with her, and we're like reporting to the same people and the same
Right.
ownership, and like I'm like, hey, remember me? I'm like the Twitter vending machine girl. Like, but yeah, it always comes back. So social and sports is definitely small
Yeah.
business for sure.
So funny. Well, I love soccer. I got into watching like a lot more soccer. I think it was right as like not mid-pandemic, but basically the first league that came back, like sports league, was like Serie A, like the Italian soccer league. So I
Hmm.
picked the team and just started watching, and so I'm a Juventus fan. But then it was
Okay.
like, but I love watching it so much. I was like, I need a Premier League team because I don't have one. So
Hmm.
I landed on Liverpool because I was like, oh, you know what?
No way.
I was like the owners of the Pens, my favorite team, also own Liverpool. They got to be good. I'm
Love
going with
it.
I'm going with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I went to a Fulham game a while back and then a Chelsea game, and then like Liverpool became part of the Penguins family, and I ended up doing like a tour of their stadium. I was like, all right,
Oh,
Liverpool's
that's
gonna be
sweet.
my new team. Like I'm not a huge soccer watcher, but I mean the atmosphere of a
Oh,
European soccer game is unlike any other. So
it's crazy. I remember there was like I think it's in the same league as the Riverhounds, but there was a team in Phoenix as well. So we got tickets to go out to a game, and it's at like a tiny stadium, like nothing crazy. But the
yeah,
fans, it was like if we could have had that fan base watching the Cardinals, like dancing, celebrating the whole game, singing songs, like lighting off these like flares and like it was like the greatest thing I've ever seen.
that's
And
awesome.
I could only imagine in like, you know, out in Liverpool or, Man United, any of these, like how insane it must be to see that.
Totally.
All right. So last question before I get to some of these quick hitter goofy things. But so back to those that are trying to get their foot in the door and they're applying for all of these different jobs, and there are
Hmm.
tons of jobs out there at different levels and different leagues, different locations. But you being in a position where you've hired quite a few people, what can they do to stand out in that process? You know, like I link it back to what we do in content. Like in content, we're trying to make stuff that makes our users stop and watch. In the job process, you're trying to get the hiring manager to stop and look at your stuff. So how do they do that?
Yeah, I think there's a few things that stand out for me. If you're creative, absolutely you need a portfolio. So that's one of the big ones is we really look at your portfolio if you're coming on in a creative role. Um, I might not care as much about like your writing skills or how your resume looks in that instance, but I care a lot about that if you're applying for a job where you're writing. So, yeah, I think it also shows that you care if you're writing a cover letter. So I always look at that, even if it's simple, just like, okay, this person took enough time, to think about this and, really put a care and effort into this application rather than just like a mass blast of applications. And this one is just like along with the group. So I think those are some like initial things. I think, yeah, depending on the role, there's different things I would probably focus on, but um, I like creativity for sure. I don't think your resume needs to look all crazy, but I think if you're creative in your writing, like if you're creative in your work that you're sharing, like let's say you're creative in you're applying for like a design position or a video producer position, like I don't want to just see a highlight video where I'm not sure where you were involved. Like I want to know, okay, well, what parts of this were you doing? Maybe there's an animation. Did you make that animation? Did you shoot those photos? Did you concept the video or did you just like edit it together? And I think being clear on which parts of the creative process you're involved with and how you're contributing to the group and the team is helpful. I really like it when people have looked at our brand with like a real fine-tooth comb and said like, hey, like I see on game days you always post your game day graphic first thing in the morning with a game preview. Like I noticed 20 other teams in the NHL do something different with their first post on game day in the morning. Like, why do you guys do that? Or like, are you seeing success from that? Or have you considered maybe this instead? Like if somebody is actually caring enough to look at our brand and take time, like huge hurdle that you
Yeah.
have just cleared. Because that's what I need you to do as an employee. And until you're doing that, like all you're doing is executing on tasks and you're not really contributing.
Right.
So
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and I always tell everyone like the job description that you see for the job, like there's your cheat sheet from the hiring manager. Like if I'm hiring for a role, I'm writing exactly the perfect person that I need is in that job description. So
yeah,
use it to your advantage. Like you don't have to like there's no rules that say here's how a cover letter works and here's how a resume needs to look. It's like use that cheat sheet as your guide for putting your resume together. Use the same buzzwords that are in the job description so it looks like you guys speak the same language in that regard. So lots of just
totally.
like little goofy things, and I can personally vouch for cover letters because when I got the Steelers job, there were thousands of applicants. I was not the most experienced, but Scott Phelps, like we were talking about before, he told me later on, like the cover letter was what got them to interview me. So it's
Mm-hmm.
it's maybe that's just one time out of thousands of jobs I applied for, but like it worked once. It could it could work for you too.
I mean, it's an easy, like, if your resume doesn't look good and you didn't write a cover letter, I don't think you care.
Yeah,
Like,
it's
it
true.
might be an immediate no, even if you're really great.
Yeah.
And I think another one that I like hate is like if we think you are awesome and we're doing an interview process and we're going through and we're um, talking to you and figuring things out, and then we get to the end of the interview and we're like, "Do you have any questions for us?" And you're like, "No." I hate that.
Yeah.
That makes me bonkers. How do you have no questions? Like, let's say you get this job, what's your first question when you like
Right.
appear at work the first day. Like you're gonna have questions. There's a million questions you could be asking about our strategy and how we got here and what's an average day look like and what is the culture of the organization and what does a good employee look like? I mean, things that will set you up for your next round of interviews, if
Yep.
nothing else, right? Yeah, when we get to an end of an interview and somebody doesn't have questions, I like die. A little piece of me dies
Yeah.
inside.
Well, I think like interviews have like they've had to have changed over the years too, right? Because like they used to be these stuffy, like, I think I've had interviews in the past that were very like formal and yeah, but it's like now that it's me doing the interview, it's not that way. It's like
Millennial interviews.
yeah, it's like I know like these are the questions that I need to ask to know that you know what you're talking about. Like you
Hmm.
clearly have the experience that I'm looking for because I'm talking to you. So like now it's just figuring out like, did you just copy a bunch of buzzwords or do you know what you're talking about? And then it's like, but I think that like maybe kids still have that in their head of like this needs to be this like wear the tuxedo, be very stuffy, like if you ask questions it's like a sign of weakness that you don't know this stuff. But it's like, you just need to be, it's fine, like you have the opportunity to ask these questions to the person who's hiring you, who could be hiring you. Why would you not? And use them to your advantage where it's like you could impress someone who's hiring you with a good question rather than just talking about yourself.
I mean, let's say like you weren't even super like hyped about this job and you were just like, interviewing and trying to get your name out there and figure things out. If you're asking me a question, like let's say you're interviewing with the Penguins, but you really want to work for the Red Wings, like maybe you know that the Red Wings are always asking a certain question in their interviews that you want to hear what my answer is as an employee that's already doing it. Like, right? Like, so if
Yeah.
you say like, hey, like what, Andy, what brands do you follow? What brands do you think are doing the best in graphic design? Or where do you draw inspiration from? Then you have all of my knowledge so that you can go to that other interview and like use that stuff or
Yeah.
like look it up yourself and really form your own opinion. But I feel like not utilizing that time with somebody who's in the industry that you're interested in, even if it's like a question like that's not directly for like
Right.
getting in and starting this job and it's like to just learn, like yeah, do it.
That's like it doesn't always have to be, like, well, how much is the pay? When would I
No,
start? Where do I live?
you'll
It's
always figure that stuff out later.
yes, exactly. And that's like so my favorite question that I now ask, I forget who I stole it from. Someone very, very smart, much smarter than me. But it was like, what question didn't I ask in this interview that you wish I did? And then
Hmm.
that's your chance to be like, okay, well now I can flex a little bit and share what I know. And then so then when they say it, I'm like, okay, well, what's your answer? And then it's like, so giving them that platform of like, okay, well, you really want to talk about this, so talk about it. Like,
Yeah,
impress me. So, and
totally.
some people, some people are so ready, and it's like, and again, like, not really a test, but kind of a test of like, you can think really quickly on your feet because in our jobs, you're going to have to. Like,
Hmm.
if O'Neill Cruz hits a home run, like, you need copy immediately. And so, like, it's
Yeah,
not,
Tristan Jari scores a goalie goal. Like it has never happened in team history. You're not
yep.
prepared for that moment.
And you have to think on your feet, you have to think quickly. So it's like even just that where it's like someone will have like two or three different things that they'll get through and some
Mhm.
people just kind of stumble and like, oh, I don't know, I think you covered it all. And it's like, oh, okay, well, guess we'll talk again soon.
Yep.